Welcome to the Audio Description Network Alliance. Today we're very happy to have another bonus episode. Today we're honored to have Jason Stark. He is the Director of Described and Captioned Media Program, DCMP. Thanks so much for joining us, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Out the gate, can you introduce us to DCMP?
Yeah, absolutely. DCMP is funded by the United States Department of Education, and our core service is a video on demand service that includes 10,000 educational media items, all subject areas focused on preschool through grade 12. And all that content is aligned to state and national curriculum standards and is distributed via an accessible platform. We've got a website that's fully accessible. All of the features of our platform are developed with accessibility first in mind. And so we've got things like an interactive transcript feature that's kind of cool because not only does it include the caption data, which you see often in interactive transcripts on other video services, but we also expose the description script text. And so for users on the web, they can search through to find specific content, to jump to that content. But what is really cool about it is it opens up a whole nother level of accessibility for individuals who are deafblind, who may not have enough vision to get benefit from the video or enough hearing to benefit from the audio. And so they can take this text transcript using whatever accessibility feature of choice, whether that be a refreshable braille display or downloading with and listening with the screen reader, have access to that full content, both the audio and the visual. The platform also has ASL support. We recently debuted that. So we have some titles with American Sign Language interpretation and users can turn that on. And then we really focus on the utilization of accessible media with students. So we recently released our Clips and Lessons tool, which allows users to take clips of DCMP items, full-length items, and build an interactive lesson, upload their own text content, ask students questions, that sort of thing. And the content's available, as I said, through the website at dcmp.org. We also have an Apple TV app, a Roku channel. We have an iOS app. So try to give users a lot of options for how they access the content. The second part of what we do to support that is technical assistance and training. And so we're working, with content providers on how they can effectively create and distribute accessible media, because, most of them, many of them don't know that. We're also, of course, working with teachers and other professionals in the schools and parents, certainly on the use of the service, also on the utilization of accessible media with their students. And then the last part is just technology development. And again, most of that's focused on the platform, how people are accessing the content through DCMP, and then also just streamlining and improving the process to create the accessibility. If we can maintain quality standards, but improve the way that we produce that content and able to up the output, then that gives us taxpayers more bang for our buck in terms of how much content DCMP can make available each year.
This is such a wonderful amount of overwhelming information. I was scribbling down some questions as you were speaking, and if we could back up to the first aspect of what you were mentioning with the video on demand, that not only do you have accessible content, but you also make the platform accessible. That, it doesn't matter if you've got all this great stuff, if you can't get it where it needs to be. I'm imagining 10 years ago, the DVDs that had audio description, but how do you turn it on? What was some of the inspiration behind having the platform? So, I mean, you made it clear the platform is a very integral part of your focus. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because this program's been around for many decades and started out with focusing on captioning for deaf and hard of hearing adults, and then transition to students. But connected to your question, I go back to the days of VHS, and of course, with closed captioning, the law was passed to require televisions to include a closed caption decoder chip. But as we all know, a teacher in a school system wheeling a media cart down from the closet um, we were afraid that if we closed captioned our VHS tapes and the teachers were required to have a television with a decoder chip and a remote that they could turn it on, we didn't want the technology to be a barrier. And so, it's the same exact concept. As you just said, what's the point of having a collection of 10,000 educational media items that are fully accessible if the end users can't access them? So again, we've decided that we would rather forego the development of a feature, or certainly delay the development of a feature, until we make sure that we get the accessibility part of that right.
Very great. And to hear about that technology barrier to where we are today, I'd imagine that both the culture of access when it comes to disability representation, whether it's entertainment media, which most of our podcasts focus on, or also, and in addition to that, also the educational aspect, that the technology barriers are being reduced just by the growth of technology as well as the changing culture. Do you see those two tied together, culture and technology, or are they kind of separate in your approach?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Obviously, for us, and I guess it's all in terms of what people are expecting, whether that's the type of media, that has changed dramatically, even in the classroom. What used to be a title that you would get from a traditional media producer might be a 20-minute classroom production, and the teachers would use that, or it might be a longer documentary that they'd break up. Well, now we're a get it now, get it quick society, and the clips and the short form content. So certainly, we have to adjust to that, and we've realized that if we don't keep up with those trends, we'll become obsolete. Again, even though we might be the only the only source out there for this wide collection of certainly described content, we just have to keep up with the pace.
Very cool. And those expectations, that get it now thing that you mentioned, I'm imagining that ties in really well to the clips and the lessons. I'm imagining Lego building blocks being able to have this full lesson, but being able to disassemble it and put this piece over here. Is that consistent with what you're
Yeah,
doing?
absolutely. The example that I use, which is kind of silly, but is, we may have a video on farm animals, and the video talks about cows and pigs and horses and chickens. But if a teacher's teaching specifically a lesson on chickens, they don't necessarily want the students to have to wade through all of that content. So instead of playing that whole video, and of course with streaming you can she could scrub ahead to that particular section, but this actually allows the teacher to identify, this is the section that I want to use with the students. And again, we're transitioning from a service that was primarily focused on the adult user, meaning the teacher, the parent who was using it with the students, to a platform that supports direct student use. So teachers can create student accounts, can decide what grade levels and content areas a student can watch. And so in addition to actually, formally assigned lessons or videos to watch, the student is free to go on and browse the web. If they like spiders, they can search for titles on spiders, and they're able to watch that content, but they're not able to watch upper level content, or content in areas that the teacher or the parent didn't want them to access.
So you can set your own boundaries. That kind of flexibility of being this assistance and training in teaching. Can we go to that too? That you said that this is something that students can access. When it comes to the teachers or the parents, setting those. I'm using the word boundaries. You give me a better word. Uh, is that also accessible?
It is. You mean the actual mechanism for setting those permissions? Yes. Again, the whole system from top to bottom, we just will not push out a system unless we know that it's fully accessible. And of course, as anybody who's developing technology, we'll miss the boat here and there, and we actually utilize testers with varying assistive technology to help us vet the accessibility of the features that we develop.
Cool. If we could talk about that when it comes to the testers, can you share a really great surprise that you learned from that testing that you're really happy that you integrated into your content?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you an interesting story that's more focused on how to work with a tester. that happened to us. And so as we were developing our website, and we were testing, the usability of the menu structure, how easily can someone find a certain feature? How can you, where do you go to do this thing? Well, so in the testing process, we would ask those types of questions. As we were watching the tester screen. Where would you go if you wanted to apply for an account? And what we were hoping they were going to do was actually use the ARIA tagged elements on the page and their screen reader to navigate through the topography of the site to find that. What we found is we were actually disclosing to him the words, and he was actually searching for the specific word. And so I don't know, it was just was an interesting experience for us, because we learned what not to do when doing these monitored testing with them, which was just kind of a neat experience. And so now we've learned to really think through how we cryptically ask for someone to do a task so that we don't give it away.
What a great example. And it's kind of neat to hear how that tester experience of being able to do the search has also had like a ripple effect, in the sense that what you're sharing with the example of the farm animals and the chicken, the goat, the spider, or whatever. It's like you can now search that as it seems like all these things are kind of integrated in the way that you're doing business.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk specifically about audio description in the context of education. That I know this is only one part of accessibility of what DCMP does, but could we talk a little bit about where you see any overlaps, let's say similarities, any similarities between entertainment media, for example, the Netflixes, the Amazon Primes, the Apple TV Pluses, and what you're doing, and audio description, or maybe some differences, some things that you're really proud of in how, specifically for education, how that is different than entertainment, or some similarities?
Sure. I think the core rules of audio description obviously apply to educational content as well as entertainment content. The broad ones like describe what you see and those kinds of things. I think where one of the major differences is in the prioritization of what to describe, because certainly for entertainment productions where the viewer might be much more interested in costumes and the setting and those types of visual elements. In an educational production, it is much more important when you have to decide what to include the mathematical formula, the quadratic formula that's on the screen. Or it's certainly more important to describe what an individual is doing at the front of a classroom, pouring the blue liquid into the red liquid and it explodes, as opposed to describing that person is wearing a white lab coat and has brown hair and that sort of thing. So I think that's the primary difference, is just in looking at what is curricularly important to the content, which is obviously not the case on the entertainment side.
Sure. So the information obviously is paramount when it comes to the, versus those emotional brushstrokes, or the visual kind of overarching sense of what an audience gets for a film or a TV series. That what we're speaking about here specifically with education is we need to know what the blue liquid is, like what's happening with the blue liquid. The other stuff is there, but it's not, it can almost be irrelevant. And I'm also curious, this brings up another possible difference. In feature films or television shows, there is this, I'll call it the enemy of time, where to stop and give that extra description that is necessary, it kind of jars the audience. It takes them out. Do you have that kind of flexibility within your program to be able to give what some call extended audio description? In other words, break the time squeeze and say, okay, here we're going to introduce some stuff, and here's the overall gist of what you're going to be seeing that we're going to describe, if I'm asking that question correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a little bit of what, I don't know if there's an official industry term, but I'm going to say pre-description, describing ahead of the action to set the stage for what the student is going to see. And then certainly, we have an advantage because we are we are the platform for distribution as well. And so we are doing actual an increased amount of actual extended or expanded description, where we're, freeze framing and providing extra space for that necessary description. Of course, it's a challenge, because part of what we do, the model of DCMP, is to secure the rights to distribute the content in exchange for providing the accessibility back to the content partners. So they allow DCMP to distribute the accessible version to our members who have to qualify for an account, and in exchange we give them back the accessibility. Well, it's a big enough challenge to get some of the content partners to even care enough about description to want to utilize the accessibility that we give back. It's almost a hurdle we can't overcome when we're asking them to deal with this augmented version of their product that we've extended. And so, typically what we do is we actually describe it both ways. We have a standard version that we describe as much as we can, prioritizing as appropriate, and that's what we give back to the producer. But then, because we're all about giving the kids what they need, that if we deem that there are these elements that need to be included in the description that make the video lose that educational punch, then we don't hesitate to do the expanded version.
Great. And you did bring up the content provider, the people, the organizations that are bringing the content to you to become that augmented version. I love that. Is there that's so cool. That kind of approach, I'm imagining, and this is where my assumptions need to be clarified by you. I'm assuming that those content providers, after they've experienced the work that you do, they understand. They start to come back more. That awareness builds a trust, as well as could it be a passion? Do they find that this is really helpful? We really appreciate what we're doing, and now we're looking at, oh, what about this? What about does it excite them in a way once they experience your work?
Yeah, absolutely. We have several content partners that absolutely describes their response. A lot of them are driven by the almighty dollar, and as we experienced with captioning, the same struggle happened with captioning on media across the board, but certainly educational media. And it wasn't until the laws were passed and school districts and across the country were basically saying, we will not buy your product if it is not captioned. That's what encouraged many of the content partners to jump on the captioning bandwagon. Well, I think until some of those same requirements are put into place for described content, many of the content partners just don't see the monetary value. Now, certainly, again, for the DCMP model, we're providing that accessibility for free, and so at least they're not having to come up with the cash out of pocket to pay for that. They're in exchange, they're giving us those rights to distribute. And I don't. That's not all of the content partners are that way. We absolutely have some great content partners who are excited to be offering description. We've got one partner that literally has completely revamped their website to support a media player that includes description, and they're hosting all of the versions of the described content that we're providing them. And so it definitely is a snowball effect. It's just been kind of slow to get there.
Sure. And it sounds like that how did you put it? That requirement has led to awareness, because they have to. It's like if the content provider wants to stay in business, they need to provide this. And could we talk a little bit about the intersectionality when it comes to closed captioning for deaf people and blind or low vision students? That I'm imagining that those two things can work together. It has to work together for the way that DCMP works. But have you found some ways that they help each other out?
Yeah, so early on when we started doing description, which would have been in the early 2000s, we experimented with including the description dialogue in captions on the screen at the same time as the narration. And so we literally captioned the dialogue, bottom the bottom quadrant of the video like it normally is, and we tested doing the description in the upper quadrant. And then in our testing, many of the people just were overwhelmed with that amount of text. So certainly providing real-time access to the description elements for deaf viewers, we seem to not get much buy-in or perceived benefit from that. Again, I'd like to say that our interactive transcript feature provides, some of that accessible, the access to that content, regardless of what accessibility options you're actually turning on in the player. You can turn captions on in the player, but have the interactive transcript only showing the description, or again, showing that mix. And so it just is a lot of visual information. I think that was the kind of consensus of the testing we did, was just, it was just so much at one time.
Wow, very cool. And looking at the DCMP itself, your focus, obviously, in everything that you've said just in this interview, and also what you represent, that academic achievement is the core of everything. That seems to be your guiding force. Is that, would you find that that's the big thing? Is it academic achievement, or what would you say would encapsulate, like, what's the big thing with
Yeah,
DCMP?
absolutely. From the Department of Ed standpoint, we're all about, documenting, improving student outcomes. So it's all about, is the use of this accessible educational media improving the educational outcomes for the students who are viewing it? So for us, that's everything from, are we selecting the right content? Do we have enough content in enough areas in the right grade levels? That sort of thing. Is the accessibility accurate and of high quality? All of those metrics go into play, obviously, as to whether or not people are using the DCMP content, and whether it's improving student outcomes. And I think the awareness side of it is the other thing that obviously is huge for us, because again, it doesn't matter that you have a great service with all this educational content if people don't understand, don't know that it's there, don't know why it's better than what else is out there. And so again, it's the challenge of working with the content partners, with, again, the get it now philosophy of, like YouTube content. YouTube's great. Anybody and everybody can produce content now, and YouTube gives a very free and easy distribution method. The disadvantages, a lot of that content, and even the so-called professional producers are targeting that content to the people who are wanting wall-to-wall dialogue, short little clips, and there simply is no room for a description to be included. And so even if the platform supports an alternate audio track, which that in itself is a completely separate challenge, but even if it does, the content does not support it. And so, one of the things that we try to do when we have the ability is to work with content partners to say, hey, it's great that you're working with us after the fact. You've produced the content, you're letting us, bolt on accessibility at the end, but then we are saddled with the constraints of what that media will allow us to do. And so we have started trying to get integrated into more of the upfront standpoint. We certainly are not tasked with producing content from start to finish. That's not really our mission. But when we can get the ear of a producer or a YouTube content creator and say, hey, either you need to be more descriptive, build that language in to your script, or you need to not do typed edits so that there's absolutely no space for the description to be added. So.
Oh, wow. Everything you just said has so many parallels, and it's so great to hear your focus on that. That's super. Where do you see audio description headed, specifically audio description in the world of education?
For us, again, a big focus is on the utilization of it. And so certainly the quality side of it is a big challenge across the board. People, on the description side, it's people taking the shortcuts of text to speech, And I know, again, that's a hot topic and bothers some viewers more than others. On the captioning side, it's just the opposite. It's speech to text and text recognition, and whether that's quality or not. So I think a big push for us is making sure people across the board, whether that's the content creators, whether it's the content consumers, or I guess more importantly, the people making the decisions for the content consumers. So that the teachers who may not be dependent upon the captions, but they're working with students who are dependent upon captions, they need to know that how to identify what quality accessibility is. So, hey, just because you pull up a title that offers accessibility doesn't necessarily mean that accessibility was created in a quality fashion, whether that be description or captioning. So I think that's a big thing. And then again, for us, it's just trying to find new ways of helping teachers use content with their students. And one of the cool things that we're planning for this next 5-year grant cycle is the ability for teachers to upload their own content, content they create themselves, not their copywritten movies or whatever that they're breaking the copyright law, but whether they wanted to video themselves, giving a lecture or that type of thing, and then provide tools for them to create accessibility, whether that's captions or description. Because again, there's a lot of content out there, and certainly I guess something to be said that you can probably find just about anything on YouTube, but there's a need for teachers to have easy way of creating content in an accessible form. And so the tools are there. Most everybody has a cell phone in their pocket that's virtually a full-fledged video editing suite right there in their pocket. But the tools on those devices don't really exist for accessibility. So it's one of the things we're hoping to do in the near future.
Oh, very exciting. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Come visit dcmp.org. Unfortunately, because we are funded by the Department of Ed, we're targeted to schools and children. So adults alone do not qualify for our program, but we have several thousand media items that are available to anyone. You don't have to qualify to utilize those. So everybody can come to the site and find some content that they're available to watch. And then we're fanatical about feedback from users, and certainly when it comes to content areas, and if users are seeing content on the educational side that is not accessible, let us know, because we'll do our best to find out who has the rights and go out and try to work with them to get it accessible.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned DCMP.org. Is there any other place that people can follow you, either social media or others?
Yeah, we've got Instagram, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got LinkedIn. So we're all over the social platforms.
Very cool. Thanks so much for joining us, Jason.
Super. Thank you so much.